My name is Ethan Marlowe, and I work as a wilderness survival instructor assigned to Glacier National Park. The following account contains approximately 1,000 words, and every moment of it happened over the course of a single day. One I still can't explain, no matter how many maps, logs, or search and rescue reports I compare it against. I've spent almost 2 decades teaching people how to navigate, track, forage, and handle emergencies in the backcountry. I can tell you what a fresh grizzly scat looks like from 20 yards out, and I can identify a storm front by the way the wind tenses right before it hits. But nothing in my training, nothing in the accumulated knowledge of field guides and ranger manuals, prepared me for what happened in the woods below the Iceberg Lake Trail. There are things out here we don't understand, things no one wants to admit exist, and I've reached a point where staying quiet feels more dangerous than saying it out loud. The day started with the same confidence I always have before leading a training session. I had 4 students, a backpacker couple from Idaho, a college kid studying environmental science, and a middle-aged guy who said he wanted to feel more competent in the outdoors. They met me at the trailhead just after sunrise, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. The clouds were thin, stretched like pulled wool over the sky, and the air carried that metallic chill Glacier is famous for. Everything felt normal, routine, almost comforting. We stepped off the main trail to hike toward the practice zone where I teach map skills and fire starting. It's about a 40-minute walk. Not far, just deep enough into the forest that tourists don't wander in. But I'd barely gotten 5 minutes into the lesson when I noticed something wrong with the tree line. Took me a moment to pin down why. The trees didn't sway, even though I could feel wind pushing against my jacket. The branches were utterly still, frozen in place like a photograph. I tried to play it off with a quiet joke, but no one laughed. They were staring too intently at the unnatural stillness. I told them we should move to the clearing anyway, keep the training going, pretend it was nothing. The forest changes in ways that don't always make sense, and most oddities turn out harmless. But each step we took made the silence heavier. We weren't talking. We weren't even stepping on anything loud. It was as if the forest muffled our movement. Even our breathing sounded muted. The Idaho woman finally whispered, "It feels like we shouldn't be here." And for the first time that morning, I didn't disagree. Right before the clearing came into view, the smell hit us. Pine and cold soil, but layered with something sour and organic, like wet fur left in a sealed space. We half expected to see a carcass. Instead, the clearing was empty except for a patch of frost. I knelt down and brushed my glove over it. The temperature wasn't anywhere near freezing. Frost shouldn't have formed. My students backed up instinctively while I tried to make sense of it. When I leaned in to look closer, the frost cracked. Not melted, cracked, like thin glass. The sound was so abrupt the college kid actually yelped. And then something moved in the trees behind us. It was soft at first, like fabric brushing against bark. All 5 of us turned. Nothing. No animal. No person. Just those frozen branches, unmoving even as I felt wind press against my back. The man who joined the class for competence kept swallowing hard, his eyes jumping around so fast they looked jittery. "We should leave," he said. "Seriously, I don't like this." I told myself I needed to keep control of the group, keep things rational. So I told everyone we'd head back to the main trail. Just a short, calm walk. No panic. We retraced our steps, only it felt wrong immediately. The path we just walked looked unfamiliar, as though someone had subtly shifted the trees when our backs were turned. Glacier's forests don't usually play tricks like that. Trails are patterns your brain knows even subconsciously. But the pattern was gone. The Idaho couple walked closer together. The college kid stuck to my side. The woods pressed in on us without changing position, the way a room can feel smaller even though the walls don't move. About 10 minutes in, we should have reached the log bridge over Miller Creek. Instead, the trail curved into a narrow corridor of spruces I'd never seen before. Their bark was darker, almost charred, but no burned scars marked the forest. The silence deepened in a way that made our footsteps sound wrong. Too close, too loud, like the sound had nowhere else to go. And then we heard it, a voice calling from just ahead. Not a shout, Not distressed, just a calm, conversational tone, saying something we couldn't quite make out. The Idaho man whispered, "Is someone else out here?" But I already knew the answer. The voice had no direction to it. It seemed to float, not carried by wind, not echoing, just present. Like it existed in the space between trees rather than coming from any living person. My instinct was to tell everyone to stop moving. Don't answer. Don't acknowledge it. But before I could, the voice spoke again. This time the words were clear. Said my name. The college kid's eyes widened. He whispered, "Dude, you're messing with us, right?" But I wasn't. I'd never heard that voice before. Yet it said my name the way someone does after searching for you in a crowd. Familiar. Intentional. Wrong. We stood there barely breathing, waiting for the woods to go back to being woods. But the voice repeated itself, louder, closer, and this time with a faint click following the last syllable, as if something had snapped its jaw shut. I told my group we needed to move. Now, fast but quiet. Don't run. Running triggers pursuit. But the second we started walking, the forest shifted again. The corridor of spruces darkened. The ground dipped where it hadn't before. And behind us, the voice repeated my name with a sound that didn't belong in any human throat. We kept moving anyway. We had no idea that turning back would only take us deeper in. We moved fast but steady, the kind of pace that tells the body something is wrong even if the mind refuses to fully accept it. The trees ahead leaned closer together, their trunks narrowing into silhouettes that looked too straight, too evenly spaced, almost like posts lining a corridor. I kept my breathing low and quiet while the other steps scraped softly behind me. Every instinct told me not to look over my shoulder, not to check how close that voice might be. But the Idaho woman broke the silence with a small gasp, and that made all of us turn. Nothing was there. No figure. No movement. But the frost patch we'd left behind earlier, somehow it had spread. A thin skin of white crept across the ground behind the last student in line, trailing us like spilled powder catching up. I didn't let anyone process it. We kept walking, each step pressing into soil that felt softer than it should be, as if the forest floor had been turned recently. A smell rose from it, cool earth mixed with something faintly metallic. The college kid whispered, "This isn't the trail. It can't be." He was right. Even if we'd taken a wrong turn, Glacier's terrain doesn't warp like this. The gradient changes, but not this quickly, not in these shapes. The landscape ahead sloped downward into a hollow I didn't recognize. When we stepped into the dip, the air temperature dropped hard enough that the Idaho woman wrapped her jacket tighter. "This feels like a cold sink," the Idaho man said, but his voice shook. Cold sinks happen naturally, air pooling low in valleys, chilling the ground. But this hollow wasn't shaped like a natural basin. It was too symmetrical, too round, as if something heavy had pressed down from above and left the earth permanently bent. The voice returned when we reached the center. It didn't call my name this time. It said, "Stop," and my group did. All four of them froze mid-step, mid-breath, mid-thought. They didn't look at me. They weren't looking at anything. They just stopped. Even the Idaho man, who had seemed ready to bolt at any moment, turned motionless as stone. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. "Hey!" I whispered. "Don't stand still like that. Keep moving." But no one responded. Their eyes were open, but unfocused, glassy, their chests unmoving. Panic punched through me. I stepped up to the Idaho woman and grabbed her arm. Her skin was warm, but she didn't react. Then their chests rose, one collective breath, slow and unnatural. They all inhaled at the same moment, held the air, and then exhaled together in a long, trembling release. The sound of it rippled across the hollow like a single body breathing instead of four separate people. And in the silence that followed, something shifted behind the tree line. It wasn't a crack or a footstep. It wasn't even sound, really. It was a change in pressure, the way you feel someone standing too close behind you before you hear them. My scalp prickled, and the hairs on my arms rose. I didn't see anything move. I didn't hear anything move. But the forest itself seemed to shift forward by an inch. The group blinked, almost in unison, and their focus snapped back like someone flipping a switch. "Keep going," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "We're leaving the hollow. Now." They didn't argue. Their muscles twitched back into motion, though each of them looked confused, as if waking from a dream they couldn't fully recall. We climbed the sloped edge of the hollow, back toward what should have been familiar terrain. When we reached the top, I expected to see the corridor of spruces behind us, but the trees had rearranged. The forest looked older here, the trunks wider, the canopy thicker. I checked the sun, the same dull glow behind clouds, but the angle felt wrong. Later in the day. Too late. We should have only spent an hour out here, maybe less. But the shadows were longer now, stretched thin across the undergrowth. The Idaho man muttered, How did it get this late?" No one answered him. I checked my watch. The screen was fogged on the inside, moisture trapped beneath the glass. It blinked 11:58 a.m., then flashed, then glitched into blankness. Just gone. The college kid looked at his phone and hissed. Dead. It was fully charged. The Idaho woman tried hers. Same result. The older guy didn't even take his out. He kept clenching and unclenching his hands, as if preparing for something physical, something imminent. Then we heard footsteps somewhere ahead. Human footsteps. Soft, measured, not running. Coming from deeper in the woods. Too far for us to see, but too close to ignore. We stopped by instinct this time, not by command. The footsteps paused too, waiting with us. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice came out tight, higher than I meant. No answer. Then the footsteps resumed, same pace, same direction, as if the person had no interest in us but wanted us to know they were there. I told everyone to step off the trail, whatever trail we were currently on, and move quietly. Glaciers' forests absorb sound in a strange way. The deeper you go, the more your footsteps vanish. But as we pressed between the pines, our steps felt too loud. The ground seemed to echo beneath us, a low vibration traveling through the soil. The Idaho woman grabbed my sleeve suddenly. "Ethan," she whispered. "Look!" A shape moved through the trees ahead. Not a person, too tall, too straight, too smooth. It glided between trunks without disturbing branches. For a moment I thought it was a trick of light, a patch of shadow shaped like a figure. But then it stopped behind a tree and stayed there, half visible, as if observing us. The others saw it too. The Idaho man's breath hitched. The college kid whispered something shaky and incoherent. The older guy took a step back, hands lifted in a defensive posture, even though none of us knew what we'd be defending against. The thing didn't move, didn't lean, didn't retreat. It simply existed there, too still for anything living. I motioned for everyone to keep moving, but quietly, slow, careful. We skirted around the figure's sight line, though I couldn't tell if it even had eyes. Once it was behind us, I felt a prickle between my shoulder blades, like it had turned without physically turning. And then, without warning, the forest opened into another clearing. Only this one wasn't a clearing. It was a place I recognized. Except, I shouldn't have. I recognized the charred stump in the center, the long split rock on the right, the slanted deadfall leaning like a crooked gate. This was our original practice clearing. But the frost was gone. Something else was waiting instead. A new set of footprints. Human footprints. Fresh. Leading directly into the treeline. Leading from the direction we had just walked. And at the end of the prints, the final one, pressed deep into the soil, was a shape unmistakably resembling my own boot tread. But I hadn't walked there. None of us had. Not yet. For a few seconds, none of us moved. We just stared at that last print in the dirt, the one shaped exactly like the tread pattern on my boots. The angle, the depth, the way the heel dug slightly heavier on one side because I favored that foot ever since a winter avalanche drill accident 8 years ago. It wasn't just similar, it was mine. But the direction it faced, that was the real problem. It angled toward the trees as if I had walked straight into them moments earlier. Only I hadn't. The Idaho woman whispered, "Ethan, what does that mean?" Her voice quivered, high and thin, like it was barely slipping out of her throat. The older man took a slow step back toward the rest of the group, the kind of instinctive retreat people make when they see something that threatens the basic rules of how the world works. I knelt to look closer at the print. The soil around it was freshly turned, moist underneath the dry layer. Whatever made it had done so in the last few minutes, maybe even seconds. I pressed a fingertip to the edge, warm, not cold, like the impression held the temperature of whoever made it. Footsteps rustled in the trees, not the slow, drifting ones we heard earlier. These were sharper, more deliberate, paced evenly like someone was circling. I stood up quickly. "We need to go," I said, but it came out quieter than intended. My throat felt dry. The Idaho man shook his head. "Go where? We're back where we started." He was right. The trees, the clearing, the air, even the shadows looked the same as they had an hour ago. Except it couldn't have been an hour. My watch was still blank, but the sun had crept lower, snagging on the ridge line like it was trying to hide behind it. The day was dying too fast. Glacier doesn't shift light like that. Not this early in the season, not on a day with no storms predicted. The college kid wiped his palms against his pants. "Okay," he whispered, panic spooling tight in his voice. "You teach survival, so tell us what this is." I wanted to answer. I wanted something rational to say, but all I had was a sinking heaviness in my gut. The kind I only felt once before, years ago, when I helped search for a ranger who got turned around in a snow squall and walked in perfect circles for 6 hours before disappearing entirely. The rescue logs said he had been walking forward the whole time, but his prints kept leading back to the same clearing until they simply didn't anymore. I didn't want to think about that. Not now. "We're going to follow the route back to the real trail," I said, keeping my voice steady even though it felt forced. "We stick together, we stay calm, and we don't stop moving." When no one argued, I took the lead again. But it felt different this time. Like something unseen was letting us leave the clearing but watching where we placed each step. We walked carefully along the path that should have returned us to the small ridge overlooking the creek. At first, it looked normal. Sunlight flickered through branches. The air smelled of pine and cold soil instead of that faint metallic bite. I started to think maybe we'd finally slipped back into the real forest. But then I noticed the silence again. Not the heavy, suffocating kind from earlier. This one was like everything around us had pulled away, holding its breath. A distant avalanche rumble echoed somewhere higher in the mountains, the only sound brave enough to exist. We rounded a curve, and there I was, standing 20 feet ahead. My entire group froze behind me. I heard the Idaho woman stifle a cry. The older man muttered, "What the hell?" under his breath. The figure in front of us wasn't a shadow or a trick of light. It was me, same jacket, same pack, same posture. But the stance was wrong. Too straight, too still. My double faced away from us, half turned toward a cluster of dark pines like someone listening to a conversation we couldn't hear. I didn't move. No one did. I could feel my own pulse thudding in my palms. Then the other me, whatever it was, tilted its head slowly to the side. So slowly it felt intentional, thoughtful, as if considering whether to acknowledge us. The movement didn't resemble human hesitation. It resembled mimicry, a rehearsal more than a gesture. The Idaho man whispered, "Don't go near it," as if I needed convincing. But the thing didn't turn all the way around. It just shifted its weight, lifted one boot, and took a single step deeper into the trees. The step landed with a soft thud, and when it did, the forest reacted. A ripple moved through the undergrowth like a breath exhaled across the ground. The soil trembled faintly, almost like something beneath it was waking up. My double took another step, and then another, vanishing between the trunks without a sound. That's when the older man grabbed my arm, voice shaking. "Do not follow that thing. Whatever it is, it's trying to pull you away from us." "That's exactly why I'm not," I said, though a cold twist formed in my chest. Because it had walked like me. It knew how I moved. And if it knew that, what else did it know? We continued in the opposite direction, angling hard west to avoid its path. My mental map of Glacier flickered through landmarks, drainages, slopes, anything that could ground us. If we could reach the contour where the ridge dipped, we'd catch sight of the lake trail. But the forest wasn't finished shifting. The light changed again. Not darker, not lighter, just wrong. Thicker. As though the rays filtering through the branches were passing through water instead of air. Dust-like particles floated, slow and deliberate, drifting upward instead of down. The Idaho woman pressed against the Idaho man's shoulder. "It feels like we're inside something," she whispered. I knew what she meant. The woods had taken on a density, a weight, a quiet pressure that didn't belong to normal space. Walking through it made our movements feel slowed, like pushing against unseen resistance. Then ahead of us, the trees parted into a narrow passage. At first I thought it was a normal game trail, but the walls of branches were too symmetrical again, too deliberate, bending inward to form a kind of archway. Shadows pooled at the entrance, thick as wet ink. In the center of the shadow, barely visible, was a shape. My own silhouette, standing still, facing us this time. Only it was taller, a few inches at least, shoulders longer, limbs slightly too stretched, like someone took my outline and pulled from both ends. It didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe, but in the darkness behind it, something else shifted. A deeper shadow or something wearing one. The college kid whimpered, "It's waiting for us." I didn't respond. I felt the truth of his words in my bones. The silhouette didn't step forward. It didn't have to, because the footsteps behind us did. Slow, steady, deliberate. Something was coming from the clearing we'd left. Something with my tread. And this time, the prints weren't waiting in the dirt ahead of us. They were being made behind us, one by one, closing in. The sound of those footsteps behind us snapped every muscle in my body tight. They weren't heavy, but they were deliberate, each step landing with the certainty of someone who already knew exactly where we were going to be. The Idaho woman grabbed her partner's hand so hard her knuckles went white. The older man turned halfway around, his eyes fixed on the trees behind us. "Ethan," he whispered, "it's following our pace." He wasn't wrong. Every time we took a step forward, a step answered behind us. We sped up. So did the footsteps. We slowed and they matched, keeping perfect distance. It was like hearing your own echo, but in footfalls, an echo with intent. I kept my voice low. "Everyone move. Don't run yet. Just move." We slipped past the arched passage where that stretched version of my silhouette still stood, unmoving, the darkness clinging to it like wet moss. I didn't let anyone linger on it. We skirted wide around the shadowed entrance, sticking close together, and entered a thicker cluster of firs that made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Then the footsteps behind us stopped. Just stopped. But the silence that followed felt even worse. It was a silence that waited. I motioned for the group to keep going as quietly as possible. The Idaho man nodded, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. The older man muttered a shaky prayer under his breath. The college kid was crying without making sound, tears streaking down his cheeks as he kept moving. The forest ahead sloped downward, and my stomach twisted with a realization I didn't want a voice. We were being funneled, guided. The woods were shaping our route, nudging us without force but with unmistakable direction. And that direction was down, toward one of the many unnamed ravines glacier hides so well that visitors never realize how easy it is to disappear between its folds. When we reached the bottom of the slope, the trees thinned into a shallow bowl filled with ferns. The air cooled again. A fine mist clung to the ground, thick enough that our legs vanished into it as we stepped forward. The Idaho woman gasped softly. "It's warm," she whispered when her hand brushed the fog. And she was right. The mist carried heat, lightly steaming upward against the colder air. I crouched low and held my palm above it. A faint vibration. So faint I would have doubted it if I didn't feel it pulsing rhythmically, like something beneath the earth breathing through the ground itself. The college kid wheezed, "This feels like a trap." And the thing is, he was right, but we had nowhere else to go. The forest behind us had gone too still, too expectant. We continued through the warm fog until we reached the far side of the bowl, where the land lifted into a narrow ridge. As we climbed it, the air thickened, heavy with some scent I couldn't identify, like wet stone and old smoke. The Idaho man's voice cracked as he asked, Does this loop back to the main trail? I wanted to lie. I wanted to reassure all of them, but the truth tasted bitter in my mouth. I don't know, I said, and then, as if the woods wanted to punish honesty, the ridge opened onto a clearing far larger than the first one, wide, nearly circular, lined by trees bent at unnatural angles. The canopy didn't close overhead, but twisted slightly, like hands cupping a bowl. At the center was a shape. At first it looked like another frost patch, but as we stepped closer, the Idaho woman dragged in a sharp breath and grabbed my arm. It wasn't frost. It was ash. Soft, pale gray ash spread in a perfect oval about 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, about the length of a human body. The Idaho man choked a curse. The older man stepped backward, shaking his head in disbelief. The college kid whispered, "Oh God," over and over, voice wobbling. There were no footprints around the ash, no sign of burning, no branches singed. It was just there, a body-shaped impression, filled with cold ash, untouched by wind or disturbance. And worst of all, the depth of the impression looked recent, as if something had lain there not long before we arrived. The Idaho woman looked at me with wide, wet eyes. "Ethan, does this look like?" "Don't say it," I cut in, but I didn't need her to. We all knew exactly what it resembled. A resting place, an imprint, like the earth had cradled a form until moments ago. A new sound rolled across the clearing then, like two stones grinding together deep underground. The ferns trembled, the trees gave a soft, sighing groan, and the ash stirred slightly, as though something beneath it shifted. Then we heard the footsteps again, but this time they weren't behind us. They were circling us, fast, slow, pacing just beyond the tree line. A rhythm that felt deliberate, like it was measuring us, choosing angles, tracing the edges of the clearing. The Idaho woman pressed her hands to her ears. "Make it stop," she whispered. The older man closed his eyes, breathing hard. The college kid crouched low, arms wrapped around himself, swaying slightly. I didn't know what to do. Every survival instinct told me to pick a direction and move, but none of the options felt safe. The clearing was a bowl, the trees were a wall, and the thing circling us was getting closer. A flick of movement caught my eye at the far edge of the clearing. Another me. This one was nearly perfect, same height, same build, same clothes. But its face was wrong. Too smooth. Not featureless, but blurred like something trying to settle into shape. When it stepped forward, the ash oval behind it shivered. The Idaho man backed away until he bumped into the Idaho woman. I stepped between them and the figure, lifting a hand instinctively in some futile attempt to protect them. The figure mimicked the motion perfectly, raising its own hand with exact timing. I dropped my arm. "So did it?" The college kid whimpered. "It's copying you." But when I stepped backward just an inch, the thing didn't mirror me. Instead, it tilted its head, assessing the distance, then stepped forward, pressing one foot directly into the ash oval. The ash parted around it like water, swallowing the shape of its boot. Except the print it left wasn't its boot. It was mine, and the moment it lifted its foot again, a second print appeared in the ash beside it, without anything stepping into the space. The prints led toward us. One step, then another, coming closer without a body making them. The Idaho woman screamed. The older man shoved her behind him. The college kid bolted to his feet. An instinct took over, raw animal panic. "Move!" I shouted. We ran. Not toward safety, not toward logic, just away. But the forest didn't let us scatter into chaos. It shaped itself again, funneling us into a single narrow path between leaning spruces, so tight the branches scraped our packs as we pushed through. Behind us, the footsteps followed. Multiple now. Not copies, not echoes, not human. And no matter how fast we ran, they stayed exactly one step behind. The path forced us into a single line, me at the front, the older man behind me, the Idaho couple squeezed tight in the center, and the college kid at the back. He kept whimpering as branches slapped his arms, though the forest swallowed the sound almost instantly, muffling it into nothing. The walls of spruce leaned inward so sharply the needles brushed our shoulders, and every few feet the path seemed to twist slightly, as if the forest were correcting our direction instead of letting us choose it. But the footsteps behind us never wavered. They landed in steady rhythm, one pause, except the pauses weren't ours. They didn't match our steps anymore. They were matching something else, some internal cadence the forest pulse seemed to follow. When the ground dipped, the Idaho woman stumbled, but the Idaho man caught her immediately. He whispered something to her, something comforting probably, but the forest swallowed his voice too. Only the footsteps behind us came through clearly, as crisp as if someone walked on gravel. Then the path widened abruptly. I almost tripped when the walls of spruce fell away on both sides, opening into a flattened stretch of forest floor devoid of underbrush. For a second I thought we'd reached a meadow, but the light was wrong. Too dim, too amber, as if trapped beneath heavy glass. The sun should have been higher. It was early afternoon when we started that last training lesson. But now it hovered low, bleeding through the canopy like dusk. The Idaho woman pointed ahead, her voice breaking. "Ethan, do you recognize that?" I did. A fallen cedar lay across the clearing, its bark peeled in the same strip I remembered from the storm last year. A stump with a lightning scar leaned to one side, and on the far end of the stretch, near a slanted cluster of rocks, our original practice clearing. Again, the one with the frost, then the one with the boot prints, then the ash oval. Only this time it had changed again. The clearing was empty, no frost, no ash, but at the center sat something new. A knife. My knife. The exact one clipped to my belt. Except my hand instinctively reached down, and I felt mine still sheathed at my hip. The metal pressing against my palm was solid, real. But the knife ahead was also mine. Same sheath wear, same nicks from when I'd used it in rescue training, the same scratched initials on the handle, M. The older man choked out. "This place is looping. It's looping and it's making copies." The Idaho man shook his head violently. "Copies of what? Us. Our gear? Our prints? Our bodies." His voice cracked on the last word. I stepped toward the knife anyway because that was the stupid survival instructor part of me, forced to examine the threat. But as I approached it, a vibration hummed through the earth. Not strong enough to knock me off balance, but strong enough to make the air shiver. The knife quivered, not from wind, from below. "Back up," I said quietly, urgently. "Everyone back up now." The Idaho woman grabbed the college kid's sleeve and tugged him toward the edge of the clearing. The older man moved beside them, but the Idaho man froze, staring at the knife with horrified fascination. "Maybe it's a marker," he said. "Maybe it wants us to see it. Maybe that's why we shouldn't." I snapped. "Move!" But it was too late. A sound rose beneath the knife. A low, grinding groan, like two enormous stones turning against each other deep underground. The soil trembled again. The knife tipped. I lifted a hand to stop the Idaho man from stepping closer. But the knife didn't fall. It stood upright, balanced on its tip, like it was being held from underneath. The Idaho man stumbled backward, hitting the Idaho woman. The college kid whimpered. The older man whispered, "This isn't real. This can't be real." Then the knife tilted slightly toward me, and the ground behind it gave a soft, shuddering inhale. A shape rose from the earth, smooth at first, like a bulge of soil pushed upward. Then it split cleanly down the middle. Something beneath the dirt shifted, slow and deliberate, lifting itself into form. I grabbed everyone and stepped back hard. The ground peeled away like fabric stretched too thin. A face formed, not fully, not human, but the suggestion of one cheek's eye hollows, the faint ridge of a nose, taking shape in the dirt just beneath the surface. A face that looked like mine, not perfectly, not like a reflection, more like an approximation, as if the forest were sculpting it from memory that wasn't quite accurate. It spoke without opening a mouth. My voice, not just similar, identical. "Ethan!" The Idaho woman screamed and clamped a hand over her mouth. The older man shouted something I didn't catch. The college kid bolted to my side, grabbing my jacket like a child. The forest trembled again. The soil face sank back into the ground as smoothly as it had risen. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the knife toppled over, not toward the ground, toward the tree line, and in that same instant, the footsteps returned, bursting from the trees to our left, close enough that the vibration hit the ground beneath our feet. "Run!" I yelled. We sprinted. No plan, no direction, just away from the clearing. The forest shifted instantly, branches bending in unnatural arcs, roots snaking underfoot to trip us. The air thickening like humidity dropped from nowhere. The Idaho woman stumbled again, but the Idaho man yanked her upright. The older man shouted, "This way!" and pointed toward a narrow split between two deadfall logs. I followed him, shoving a branch aside as it scraped across my cheek. The trees opened only slightly, just enough for us to squeeze through, until we reached a slope so steep it practically dropped into another valley. The Idaho man yelled, "We can't go down that!" But the footsteps behind us were too close. The forest shook, so I grabbed a handful of roots, swung myself over the edge, and slid. The others followed, soil kicking up, branches snapping, every second a blur of motion as we half fell down the incline. The Idaho woman screamed when her foot caught a rock, but she kept moving, desperation overriding pain. We hit the bottom hard, staggered upright, and stopped, because the valley floor was wrong. The ground was covered in footprints, hundreds, all identical to mine, all pointing inward, toward the center, where a single perfect circle of undisturbed soil waited. The Idaho man whispered, voice breaking, "Ethan, they're directing us." The college kid sobbed, "Into what?" I didn't have to answer. I already felt it, a pressure in the air, presence, the woods inhaling before something stepped out to meet us. The pressure in the air thickened until my ears rang. It felt like altitude sickness, except we were deep in a valley, not climbing a ridge. The ground trembled in a steady rhythm beneath our feet, as if the earth itself had a heartbeat we'd never noticed until now. The Idaho woman clutched her abdomen like she was nauseous. The older man braced himself with a hand against a tree, wincing as though the pressure behind his eyes had doubled. Even the college kid looked dazed, swaying on his heels. The Idaho man whispered, "Ethan, what is that?" His voice cracked down the center. I couldn't answer. I was too busy watching the footprints. Every single one, hundreds of them, had my tread, my size, my pattern. Each angled in toward the center of the valley where the only untouched soil remained. A trap, an invitation, command. I didn't know which, but something wanted me to step into that untouched circle. I refused. Instead, I lifted a hand, motioning for the group to move backward slowly. "Stay close," I murmured. "We're pulling out of this valley. Don't step inside the circle. Don't step anywhere near it." But the college kid made a mistake. He stumbled on uneven ground and his heel clipped the edge of one of the footprints. It was tiny, barely a millimeter of overlap, but the effect was immediate. The entire valley exhaled. The pressure vanished. A rush of cold swept up from the earth like air escaping a vacuum. The footprints around us, all those identical impressions, shifted by a hair, like something deep below tugged them into new alignment. The valley trembled lightly, the loose soil around our feet vibrating. And then the sound came, a soft, dragging inhale from directly beneath the undisturbed circle. Not an animal, not wind, not human. The Idaho woman backed into her partner, eyes wide with primal terror. The older man whispered, "We have to run." Even though there was nowhere to go that didn't involve climbing the steep slope behind us. The forest had funneled us down. Now the slope seemed twice as tall. The dragging sound deepened. Then it moved, not upward, not outward, sideways, under the soil, traveling fast, straight toward us. "Move!" I yelled. We all sprinted toward the slope, scrambling up the incline even though the ground gave way under us like loose sand. The Idaho man made it halfway before sliding back, dragging the Idaho woman with him. The older man reached for a root and grabbed hold, pulling himself higher by sheer panic. The college kid fought his way upward, clawing at branches, slipping and catching himself again. I turned back just in time to see the soil at the valley center bulge. Then tear. A line split across the dirt, clean, straight, purposeful, like something beneath the ground had traced a seam with surgical precision. The soil lifted, peeled inward, and folded back. A dark cavity yawned open, silent, waiting. I jammed my boots into the dirt and shoved upward, grabbing the Idaho woman's arm. Up! Go! She tried, but her feet slid again. The Idaho man wrapped an arm around her waist and pushed her ahead of him. The soil behind us convulsed. Not a tremor, a ripple, like something huge rolled under the forest floor. A shape rose beneath the loose earth, human-sized, but wrong, so very wrong. It pressed upward like a mold pressing a cast from below, outline first, then details. A head, shoulders, arms, torso, legs, all pushing at the earth from underneath, forming a perfect silhouette in the dirt. My silhouette, oh God, it was my shape. The soil bulged in my exact proportions, rising, forming a near-perfect body print. Then the arms shifted, slowly spreading wide, widening further than a human could manage. The legs grew longer, the torso stretched, the face bulged thinned into something too narrow. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was evolving something from me, shaping itself with my form as a template. The Idaho man screamed, "Ethan, go!" But my legs refused for a second, locked by the horrifying recognition that whatever lived under the dirt wasn't just imitating us. It was learning us. Footsteps thundered behind me, real ones, from the trees, the ones that had been following us all day, closing in fast. The ground shape jerked violently, as if something underneath was pushing upward with sudden force. The soil strained, cracking, dust exploding outward as the form pressed higher, and then hands burst through the dirt. Long, narrow hands, fingers too many joints, gripping the soil like they were pulling a body through a tight seam. The ground split wider around them. I snapped back into motion, adrenaline slamming through me. I grabbed the Idaho woman and shoved her upward. The Idaho man pushed from behind. The college kid reached back and grabbed her wrist, hauling her toward him. The older man screamed down the slope, "Ethan, now!" The valley floor shook more violently. Small rocks bouncing, dust sizzling through the air as the thing beneath the ground forced more of itself upward. The fingers flexed, hooked into the earth, and pulled. The soil shape rose. No, not the shape. The thing making the shape. Its head broke the surface, covered in a shifting layer of dirt that peeled away as it emerged. Underneath the earth, its skin was pale, a dull gray-white like something kept from the sun too long. Its facial structure resembled mine, but stretched thin, like someone had made a copy and let it warp in heat. Its eyes opened. They weren't eyes. They were pits, hollow, moving. Inside those pits, something flickered, small lights, blue-white, like distant stars blinking in endless tunnels, like it was looking up from somewhere impossibly deep. The Idaho woman screamed. The college kid nearly lost his grip as she scrambled. The older man shouted prayers until they collapsed into choking sounds. The creature, if I could call it that, pulled itself entirely out of the ground, limbs unfolding with cracking joints, soil falling from its shoulders like shed skin. It moved like someone figuring out how to stand, slow, unsteady, testing its weight. Then it tilted its head toward me, recognizing me. A voice came out of its throat. My voice. Ethan. Not mimicked, not copied. Perfect. Like someone recorded me speaking an hour ago and played it back through something that shouldn't be able to speak at all. The Idaho man grabbed my pack and dragged me up the slope. The older man reached down and hauled me by the arm. The college kid pulled the Idaho woman beside him, gasping and sobbing and muttering, "Oh God! Oh God!" The creature took a step. The ground around its foot depressed inward, like the earth wanted to hold it, not resist it. I scrambled up the slope, slipping twice before grabbing a thick root and pulling myself over the crest. But as we reached the top, the forest ahead changed. Again, the trees bent back in a slow, rippling wave, opening a corridor, a path we hadn't seen before. And at the end of that path, another me stood waiting, not warped, not stretched, not deformed. This one was perfect, absolutely identical, except for one thing: its eyes were solid white. No pupils, no emotion, no acknowledgement of the world around it. And yet, smiled. A slow, deliberate curl of lips that didn't belong to me at all. The Idaho woman sobbed. The older man whispered, "God help us." The college kid fell to his knees. The Idaho man grabbed my wrist, trembling so hard it hurt. The perfect duplicate raised a hand and pointed at me, then curled two fingers in a gesture telling me to come forward. Behind us, the creature in the valley screamed. In my voice. The scream behind us didn't fade. It expanded, rolling through the trees like a shockwave, rattling branches, vibrating in the hollow of my chest until my ribs ached. The Idaho woman clapped her hands over her ears, kneeling on the forest floor. The college kid hunched over, gagging. The Idaho man grabbed him by the collar to keep him from collapsing. But the perfect copy of me standing ahead, it didn't flinch at the scream, not even a blink. Its white eyes stayed locked on mine, unbroken, unfeeling, like whatever lived behind them wasn't bothered by sound at all. Curled its fingers again, beckoning. A simple gesture, but it felt like a command. Not threatening, not aggressive. Worse, patient, expectant. I stepped backward. I stepped forward. The smile grew. The older man grabbed my arm, whispering hoarsely, "Don't go near it. Ethan, listen to me. Don't let it get close." His grip trembled so violently I could feel each panic pulse through his fingers. The scream behind us shifted suddenly, cracking, shuddering, as if the creature's throat couldn't decide what voice to produce. For a split second, it wasn't my scream. It was the Idaho man's, then the Idaho woman's, then the college kid's. Then it clicked back to mine again, echoing wrong, layered with something deeper. The forest floor shook. Branches to our left split apart with a wet creaking sound, sap dripping down like dark blood. The Idaho woman crawled to her feet, face streaked with tears. "We have to go," she begged. "Please, Ethan, we have to go now." The duplicate ahead of us didn't move fast. It didn't have to. It stepped closer like someone descending a staircase. Calm, measured, certain of its destination. The corridor of trees behind it widened, branches bending away in slow arcs, unfurling like something alive was pulling them aside. The passage didn't look man-made. It looked prepared. "Don't take that path," the older man whispered. "Whatever made it is waiting." But the other option, the valley we just escaped, was shaking violently now. Soil collapsed inward. Something huge moved below the surface like a massive creature tunneling upward. We were boxed in. The forest wanted us to choose. The Idaho man grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to face him. "Ethan," he pleaded, "you're the survival instructor. Pick something. Pick anything. Just, please do something." I wanted to tell him I knew what to do, that I understood some rule that could get us out, that I had a plan. But all I had was instinct, and instinct screamed at me that the thing ahead wanted me separated from the rest. That was the one rule that mattered. Don't get separated. Not out here. We're going sideways, I said. Not toward the valley. Not toward that thing. Pick a direction and go. The college kid sobbed out, "There is no sideways. The forest fucking closes every time we try. Then we make our own path," I said. I didn't wait for them to argue. I charged to the right, shoving through a thick wall of young firs. Branches whipped my face. The bark scraped my arms. The forest resisted at first, like trying to force through a woven curtain. But then something broke. The barrier gave way, collapsing with a cracking shriek of splintering wood. The others followed, crashing through the tight lattice in a chaotic line. The Idaho woman gripped the back of the college kid's pack to keep him close. The older man shoved branches aside with brute strength. The Idaho man stayed right behind me, breathing in panicked bursts. Behind us, the perfect copy hissed. Not loudly, not aggressively, softly, a hiss like air pulled through teeth. A hiss that sounded, unnervingly, like disappointment. Then it began walking faster, not running, just removing the hesitation from its gait. And the creature in the valley screamed again, this time a piercing, high-pitched shriek that nearly dropped me to my knees. The sound shook the trees. Birds exploded from the canopy in every direction. We shoved deeper into the dense growth until the branches finally thinned, and the forest spat us into a small ravine. At first I thought it was nothing more than a natural depression. But then I saw the marks on the trees. Deep parallel gouges, 10 feet tall, too high for a bear, too clean for random damage. The Idaho man froze. What made those? I would have lied. I should have lied. But the truth slipped out before I could stop it. I don't know. The woods behind us rustled. One rustle, then another, then silence. The older man whispered, "Ethan, something is tracking us from both directions. Not something, two somethings. One copying us from above ground, one shaping us from below." We scrambled along the ravine, slipping down the damp slope. The mud gave way under our boots, sending us sliding in short bursts. The Idaho woman tripped and the college kid caught her. The older man stumbled but kept upright by clutching a root. Then the ravine curved sharply and dead-ended. A wall of stone, a sheer cliff, 10, maybe 12 feet high, slick with moss and groundwater. Too tall for an unassisted climb, too smooth to find easy holds. The Idaho woman's voice broke into a sob. "No, no, no, Ethan, we can't go back. We aren't going back," I said, but my throat was dry. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't have a plan. The rustling in the trees returned, this time behind us. Closer. The older man looked at me with hollow eyes. "We're out of places to go." I scanned the cliff face, searching for anything. Any break, any crack, any handhold. Nothing. Just stone and moss and water. Then the Idaho man pointed up, voice trembling. "There, look, in the rock. A narrow cleft, barely a body's width, running from the base up toward a shadowed ledge. Possible way out." But the rustling behind us grew louder. Footsteps this time. 2 sets, heavy and light, mirroring each other. One moving with deliberate intent. One dragging something through leaves. The Idaho woman squeezed my arm. "Ethan, please, what do we do?" I stared at the cleft in the rock. Tight, vertical, dark, maybe climbable, but only one person at a time, which meant the others would be exposed down here while someone climbed, exposed to whatever walked behind us. "We climb," I whispered, "one by one, slow, careful, don't look down." The Idaho man swallowed hard. "Who goes first?" And before I could answer, the forest behind us went quiet. Not natural silence, engineered silence. Then a single step echoed through the trees. Not behind us, not to either side, right above us. On the ledge we wanted to climb to, a shape leaned over the top of the cliff. My shape, white eyes, motionless face, no breath, no expression, just watching, waiting. The Idaho woman whimpered, "Ethan, I know," I whispered, because the perfect copy raised a hand and pointed down at me again. But this time it didn't beckon. This time it tapped 2 fingers to its chest, then pointed at mine. A trade, a replacement. Behind us, the creature from the valley growled with my voice, "Ethan." The copy above me didn't move after pointing at its chest and then at mine. It just held the gesture like time didn't matter to it, like the day could last forever if we didn't obey. The Idaho woman whimpered. The older man staggered backward until he pressed against the ravine wall. The college kid's breath came in short, sharp bursts, like he was hyperventilating but trying not to make sound. And behind us, the creature from the valley dragged its long limbs through the trees, each movement cracking branches and tearing roots from the ground. Dirt sifted down the ravine like falling ash. The sound it made with my stolen voice was quieter now. Not a scream, a call, searching, wanting. The Idaho man clutched my arm. "Ethan, no matter what happens, don't go up there. But the perfect copy didn't look like something I could fight or outrun. It didn't even look physical in the normal sense. It was like standing in front of a reflection that forgot what reflecting was and decided to exist on its own terms. His white eyes weren't dead. They were patient, calculating, waiting for me to choose. I looked at the narrow cleft in the rock, the only way up to the ledge, the only path past the copy. One person at a time. The others would be sitting ducks here if they had to wait while someone climbed. And I understood something in a painful, cold flash. It didn't want the group. It wanted me. Everything today had been arranged to push me into that choice. I lifted a hand to tell the Idaho man to get everyone ready to climb. But before I could say a word, the ground behind us split open. The creature from the valley forced its upper body into the ravine, soil exploding outward. Its elongated limbs dug into the slope, pulling itself forward with a sickening grace. Its head cocked, dirt falling from its hollow, shifting eye pits. The flickering lights deep inside those pits brightened, swirling like distant stars in dark tunnels. It stared at me, only me. Then it spoke again, in my perfectly copied voice, quieter this time as if pleading. "Ethan," the Idaho woman sobbed. The college kid gagged and tried to crawl backward. The older man pressed both palms flat against the cliff, whispering no, no, no like a mantra. The valley creature pulled one leg free, unnaturally long, jointed wrong, and swung it forward, toward us, toward me. The perfect copy on the ledge tilted its head slowly, white eyes narrowing as if irritated. It lifted one finger and tapped it lightly against the rock beside it. A simple gesture, but it vibrated the stone all the way down the ravine wall. The creature behind us froze. It didn't retreat. It didn't advance. It just halted, locked in place, trembling. The copy controlled it, or outranked it, or something even worse. I had no time to understand. The Idaho man shoved me hard. "Ethan, move. Pick something. We can't stay here." He was right. Doing nothing meant death or something worse for all of us. I stepped toward the rock cleft. The perfect copy leaned closer over the edge, that smile stretching too wide now, like it sensed its victory. The valley creature hissed, shifting its weight as if readying to lunge the moment the copy allowed it. I turned to my group. Their faces were raw terror, helpless, waiting for me to choose the only path that made sense. "Climb," I said. "All of you." The Idaho woman shook her head violently. "We're not going without you." "Yes," the Idaho man rasped. "We stay together." "You won't survive if you don't go now," I said, and my voice cracked for the first time all day. "Go, please." The older man was the first to understand. He put a hand on the Idaho woman's shoulder. "He's right." His voice was hollow. "Whatever this thing wants, it's centered on Ethan. If he stays here, we might get out. If he climbs with us." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The copy's smile widened. The valley creature's fingers flexed. The college kid's voice broke into a whisper. "Ethan, don't do it." But I'd already stepped toward the bottom of the cliff. Not the cleft leading upward, but directly beneath the perfect copy. The Idaho woman screamed, "No!" The Idaho man grabbed her, holding her back. The college kid begged, "Please don't, please don't." The older man whispered a prayer under his breath. Behind me, the valley creature dragged itself another foot into the ravine, muscles twitching, waiting for its cue from the thing above. The perfect copy bent down, extending a hand, a gesture of acceptance, a demand, a replacement. The fingertip hovered inches from my chest, right over my heart. And the moment it touched my shirt, just the faintest brush, everything changed. The forest exhaled. All at once, a gust of wind slammed through the ravine strong enough to knock the Idaho woman to her knees, to send the college kid sprawling, to shove me backward so hard I hit the ground. The creature behind me shrieked. A layered, distorted sound that wasn't mine anymore. Dirt exploded around it as it thrashed violently, losing shape, its limbs buckling inward like wet wood snapping. The perfect copy jerked upward, head snapping back as if yanked by invisible wires. Its white eyes flashed with something like fury, Not human anger, something colder, and the entire ledge trembled beneath it. The stone cracked, the ground the copy stood on collapsed, and the perfect version of me fell, silently, almost gracefully, disappearing into the forest below, swallowed by branches and shadow. The valley creature let out a final, horrible cry, then collapsed into its own imprint, dissolving like wet sand. Silence hit the ravine. Real silence, not manufactured, not controlled. Wind moved naturally again. Branches rustled the way they were supposed to. The cold air felt exactly like glacier should. The Idaho man crawled to me. "Ethan, your eyes." He froze. His breath caught. The Idaho woman stopped crying mid-sob. The college kid stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. The older man made the sign of the cross. "What?" I rasped. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. I saw it in their faces. Something still stood behind me. Something taller. Something wearing my outline. I didn't turn. I didn't want to know which one it was. The wind shifted. Leaves crackled. And a voice, my voice, whispered directly into my ear. The woods remember their choices. Then the presence stepped back. Branches parted. Footsteps faded. When I finally turned, nothing was there. Just glacier. Just the forest. Just the late afternoon light. I'm writing this now from my cabin outside the park boundary. The others made it out. They confirmed hours later that something walked beside us all the way back to the trailhead, just out of sight. And I know it's not over, because when I took off my boots tonight, soil spilled out of them. Not glacier soil, not the forest floor, but pale fine ash, like the shape in the clearing, like something had climbed into my footprints, while we weren't looking, and I think it's still following me, somewhere between the trees, somewhere just out of sight, somewhere waiting for me to step back into the woods, so it can finish what the forest started. On that single impossible day, you have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan. The copy above me didn't move after pointing at its chest and then at mine. It just held the gesture like time didn't matter to it, like the day could last forever if we didn't obey. The Idaho woman whimpered. The older man staggered backward until he pressed against the ravine wall. The college kid's breath came in short, sharp bursts, like he was hyperventilating but trying not to make sound. And behind us, the creature from the valley dragged its long limbs through the trees, each movement cracking branches and tearing roots from the ground. Dirt sifted down the ravine like falling ash. The sound it made with my stolen voice was quieter now. Not a scream, a call, searching, wanting. The Idaho man clutched my arm. "Ethan, no matter what happens, don't go up there." But the perfect copy didn't look like something I could fight or outrun. It didn't even look physical in the normal sense. It was like standing in front of a reflection that forgot what reflecting was and decided to exist on its own terms. His white eyes weren't dead. They were patient, calculating, waiting for me to choose. I looked at the narrow cleft in the rock, the only way up to the ledge, the only path past the copy. One person at a time. The others would be sitting ducks here if they had to wait while someone climbed. And I understood something in a painful, cold flash. It didn't want the group. It wanted me. Everything today had been arranged to push me into that choice. I lifted a hand to tell the Idaho man to get everyone ready to climb. But before I could say a word, the ground behind us split open. The creature from the valley forced its upper body into the ravine, soil exploding outward. Its elongated limbs dug into the slope, pulling itself forward with a sickening grace. Its head cocked, dirt falling from its hollow, shifting eye pits. The flickering lights deep inside those pits brightened, swirling like distant stars in dark tunnels. It stared at me, only me. Then it spoke again, in my perfectly copied voice, quieter this time as if pleading. "Ethan," the Idaho woman sobbed. The college kid gagged and tried to crawl backward. The older man pressed both palms flat against the cliff, whispering no, no, no like a mantra. The valley creature pulled one leg free, unnaturally long, jointed wrong, and swung it forward, toward us, toward me. The perfect copy on the ledge tilted its head slowly, white eyes narrowing as if irritated. It lifted one finger and tapped it lightly against the rock beside it. A simple gesture, but it vibrated the stone all the way down the ravine wall. The creature behind us froze. It didn't retreat. It didn't advance. It just halted, locked in place, trembling. The copy controlled it, or outranked it, or something even worse. I had no time to understand. The Idaho man shoved me hard. "Ethan, move. Pick something. We can't stay here." He was right. Doing nothing meant death or something worse for all of us. I stepped toward the rock cleft. The perfect copy leaned closer over the edge, that smile stretching too wide now, like it sensed its victory. The valley creature hissed, shifting its weight as if readying to lunge the moment the copy allowed it. I turned to my group. Their faces were raw terror, helpless, waiting for me to choose the only path that made sense. "Climb," I said. "All of you." The Idaho woman shook her head violently. "We're not going without you." "Yes," the Idaho man rasped. "We stay together." "You won't survive if you don't go now," I said, and my voice cracked for the first time all day. "Go, please." The older man was the first to understand. He put a hand on the Idaho woman's shoulder. "He's right." His voice was hollow. "Whatever this thing wants, it's centered on Ethan. If he stays here, we might get out. If he climbs with us." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The copy's smile widened. The valley creature's fingers flexed. The college kid's voice broke into a whisper. "Ethan, don't do it." But I'd already stepped toward the bottom of the cliff. Not the cleft leading upward, but directly beneath the perfect copy. The Idaho woman screamed, "No!" The Idaho man grabbed her, holding her back. The college kid begged, "Please don't, please don't." The older man whispered a prayer under his breath. Behind me, the valley creature dragged itself another foot into the ravine, muscles twitching, waiting for its cue from the thing above. The perfect copy bent down, extending a hand, a gesture of acceptance, a demand, a replacement. The fingertip hovered inches from my chest, right over my heart. And the moment it touched my shirt, just the faintest brush, everything changed. The forest exhaled. All at once, a gust of wind slammed through the ravine strong enough to knock the Idaho woman to her knees, to send the college kid sprawling, to shove me backward so hard I hit the ground. The creature behind me shrieked. A layered, distorted sound that wasn't mine anymore. Dirt exploded around it as it thrashed violently, losing shape, its limbs buckling inward like wet wood snapping. The perfect copy jerked upward, head snapping back as if yanked by invisible wires. Its white eyes flashed with something like fury, not human anger, something colder, and the entire ledge trembled beneath it. The stone cracked, the ground the copy stood on collapsed, and the perfect version of me fell, silently, almost gracefully, disappearing into the forest below, swallowed by branches and shadow. The valley creature let out a final, horrible cry, then collapsed into its own imprint, dissolving like wet sand. Silence hit the ravine. Real silence, not manufactured, not controlled. Wind moved naturally again. Branches rustled the way they were supposed to. The cold air felt exactly like glacier should. The Idaho man crawled to me. "Ethan, your eyes." He froze. His breath caught. The Idaho woman stopped crying mid-sob. The college kid stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. The older man made the sign of the cross. "What?" I rasped. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. I saw it in their faces. Something still stood behind me. Something taller. Something wearing my outline. I didn't turn. I didn't want to know which one it was. The wind shifted. Leaves crackled. And a voice, my voice, whispered directly into my ear. "The woods remember their choices." Then the presence stepped back. Branches parted. Footsteps faded. When I finally turned, nothing was there. Just glacier. Just the forest. Just the late afternoon light. I'm writing this now from my cabin outside the park boundary. The others made it out. They confirmed hours later that something walked beside us all the way back to the trailhead, just out of sight. And I know it's not over, because when I took off my boots tonight, soil spilled out of them. Not glacier soil, not the forest floor, but pale fine ash, like the shape in the clearing, like something had climbed into my footprints while we weren't looking, and I think it's still following me, somewhere between the trees, somewhere just out of sight, somewhere waiting for me to step back into the woods, so it can finish what the forest started. On that single impossible day, you have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan.